So this week's episode of Fire Force goes in a pretty interesting and emotionally gripping direction that I wasn't expecting. The first half going over how the 8th Division was formed, with the second half really showcasing a side to apparently the strongest fighter in this world in a very human way that I wasn't expecting. It was nice to actually see the formation of the 8th Division, especially because we're surrounded by so much corruption and who can you really trust, who's actually in it for the right reasons, and you can look at the 8th from everything that we've seen over the past 10 weeks and say they're the good guys. But it is nice to have this week's episode really hammered in 100% confirm that this is the most pure division that's in this world. And it was so interesting to see the direction of the backstory and how it was all formed, because we get the captain and the lieutenant of the 8th Division kind of giving story time and explaining how everything was formed. And we see a section of this past where you get to see a pretty cold, pretty, almost you would say ruthless, but also compassionate character who tries to say, why is this person in the organization? They're too kind, and why does everyone want to be around me? It's kind of like that emo phase where he tries to act a little more cold than he is, but he'll do things such as carry the trays around. He'll basically make sure he puts himself in other people's shoes and make sure that they are taken care of. Even if it's little things, he still does kind actions that help people. And when one of your closest friend just combusts when you're sleeping, and he's kind of explained why the idea of religion and these kind of ways to take out infernals are important, he can't pull the trigger because his gun isn't baptized. I thought it was so interesting. It was really a wake-up call for at least myself and probably many viewers that sometimes the way we look at these characters, even if they may not show a lot of emotions, there's really a lot of depth to the actions behind them. Even if someone's not religious in this world, there's a reason why the 8th Division is very religious on surface level, because for a lot of the people, they would rather be killed with a baptized weapon than just mowed down by machine guns like what happened to Hinawa's friend. And I think it's pretty clear why someone, and especially a lot of these characters within the 8th Division, are so religious, even if they don't really appear to be the religious types of folks, except a nun here and there. And that was so interesting because it really laid the foundation of why someone would really want to push back against the kind of status quo of this world, and then seeing how our captain pretty much was just a normal firefighter, and then he sees all the BS of just people with the point system and how they go after certain infernals because they'll be rewarded better, and they'll let people suffer and burn by themselves, and it's just scummy, it's corrupt. But you could honestly see things like that happening if something like this was to occur in our world. You'd have a lot of pretty shady divisions in a fire force, so to speak. And actually see how they came together and put someone out of their misery, literally could have become criminals, gone to jail. This was like taboo, you can't go behind the lines. But it was so interesting, and it really kind of like 100% confirms there's no doubts that you can have, which not many people are going to have doubts about the 8th Division before this episode, but it's one of those things that it really does highlight this is the pure division. Everyone may have their pros and cons with members, but they have a very close-knit group, and the entire purpose of forming it was only people that he trusts. And if we go back into like episode 3 or around that area, there was a moment where both Arthur and Shinra had a wake-up call. If you guys go flailing your weapons around, I don't want you in my crew. And this episode, in comparison to that dialogue, it really does show that this is a captain, this is a crew where respect and cherishing human life is what's important. And there's other divisions that are going to cherish human life, sure, but to see what this captain and his team are doing, I think it really does show like the strength of Fire Force's writing. When it really gets it right, I think it really nails the landing, as this was probably one of the strongest episodes of this season of Fire Force, honestly. Even though it was dialogue and flashbacks for the most part, it was just gripping. It really let our characters shine in a different light that, for the most part, we've already seen them in, but really reinforce why they are this way and kind of show just how great this division is, and Shinra really did get lucky in who he ended up joining up with. Though when we got into the 7th Division, this was different. I thought it was going to be a bit more troll-like, maybe someone who didn't care about human life. He seemingly was kind of walking around his people, not really caring, feeling like he was exhausted. And, when we have our characters come in saying, hey, we gotta investigate everyone, we don't care if this is a bothersome thing for you, we have to do this, and then an infernal. Probably the most unexpected part of the episode. Literally having the strongest fighter in this world who can use both 2nd and 3rd generation, so he can create flames but then also control them, and everyone in this town, they cheer him on. Because for them, if this could randomly happen. If we can randomly burst into flames, we would want him to take us out because he makes our life feel safe and he respects us. Even though you see all this destruction and you think, what the hell? He's destroying buildings. This has to be the worst captain out of all of them. Like, look at the carnage. But then when you really see what he's doing, it's just as compassionate as even the 8th Division. I love seeing how the people in this town, they view buildings as buildings. You know, we can rebuild a building, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what has to happen to objects, as long as the people get to feel safe and knowing that their captain is going to make sure that he's the one to put them out of their misery in a very swift and peaceful action. He talks to them as a human, and as you can see, even as the Infernal's dying, he lays his hand on his shoulder because that's what they wanted. It's this weird connection that on the outside, and even seeing what we just saw, it's hard to say, like, is this really perfect or righteous? But it kinda is, because in this world, it's so crazy and twisting and turning that, you know, people can burst into flames and become demons, even though you could look at the 8th as maybe being a more, like, it's easy to look at them and kind of compare it to reality where you could use religion to give people peace of mind, but this equally is giving people peace of mind, just in a different way, maybe a more violent way, but to them, this is how they would want to go out, and that's kind of the culture and climate that he's created, and he burdens himself with it each time. And that's what was so fascinating about this episode. Literally both halves basically highlighted how both of these captains are doing what they believe in and making sure people have peace of mind, just in very different ways. One's a lot more peaceful, not trying to mow people down, where another is blowing up his town basically to control flames and give a one satisfying finishing blow so they don't have to suffer. This is the type of episode that really flexes Fire Force's strengths. It doesn't do anything majorly wrong. There's nothing glaring or jarring about this episode, and the few instances where they kind of were a little funny, a little cheeky, it wasn't distracting in the slightest. It really was a pretty serious, but for the most part, down-to-earth episode that really shows the humanity of these characters. And after all the corruption and kind of like pondering who can we trust, who is good or evil, it was nice to walk out of an episode of Fire Force where we got characters outside of Shinra's company and say, wow, that wasn't what I was expecting, but he's a lot different than I initially thought, which is kind of the purpose of this episode overall. And I love the way they framed this man, the 7th captain. I just thought he looked so emotionless, so cold, but there was a couple of shots that really gave you, even though he didn't say much, you could really tell behind that almost emotionless glare was someone who, he has a lot of guilt and burden, but this is what he has to do because he's the man for the job. And imagining if you were literally the strongest person in the world and you knew, like, even if there was another strong person, like, you have to do this. You have to be a captain even if it hurts you. Like, it's interesting how they can get a lot of emotion and just range out of these characters even when they're not speaking, just by proper framing techniques or just even reactions from some of the other characters. Shinra is a pretty hot-headed character. He's someone who wanted to punch the man when he first met him, but there's a reason why he set down the old lady on the roof and didn't attack him or didn't yell at him, because he recognizes that this is what the people want. It's just a different way than his division deals with it. And that's what I love, the backstory to really highlight why the 8th Division is so great and really why they're so strict on not flailing weapons around and things like that and being respectful. We're giving another division a completely different playing field, but making us feel like they have an equal level of respect. This world is actually fairly interesting. They got these humans that can randomly burst into flames, you got corruption and sabotage and weird cults doing all these things, and it's kind of getting harder and harder to tell which side really has more right or wrong going for it, because as you can see, just the general Fire Force soldiers, half the time they'll make up point systems who they kill first and it's a game to them, or they'll mow people down. There's not a lot of compassion, but the people who do have compassion and the good captains and soldiers of this world really are taking on a lot of burden and making sure families have peace of mind for their families' dying moments. This episode didn't have a lot of like crazy animation, but when it did go into those flames, it looked gorgeous and a lot of unique visuals overall, which I do have to continue to appreciate the fact that every time a character is revealed like what their powers are, not only are the powers visually distinct with how they stylize it, especially with explosions around an entire town, and just how they'll use objects to incorporate themselves with their abilities, at a written level, they feel completely different, even at surface level that you might say, oh, they're just all fire abilities. It's nice how much humanity's behind this show. I just once again love just seeing characters being like, oh, I thought I was just recruited because I'm a meat shield, but you actually thought I was a nice person. Like, it just feels like this was a damn good episode. I don't have any other thing to say about it. A damn good episode. Like, that's the best way to represent it. It just felt like for all the dialogue that happened, I was glued to the screen. I was like, this is what I want to see. Last week was a fine episode, solid episode overall, but wasn't going to blow anyone away. This episode, I actually think will blow a lot of people away. There was a lot of emotion, there was a lot of weight to this, and we even got some eye candy towards the end of the episode while feeling emotionally attached to what was happening on screen. It was just nice, it was refreshing, and was an incredibly satisfying and fulfilling episode of Fire Force overall, but I'd be very interested in hearing what everyone thought. Did you enjoy it as much as myself, or was this one of the episodes that let you down? Whatever you're feeling, let me know down in that comment section below. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like and also hit that subscribe button if you have been new. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.